Greetings, Bat Family, and welcome back to Holy BatCast, brought to you by Real Fans for Real Movies. Make sure you visit our website, holybatcast.com. It's your one-stop shop for all things Holy BatCast. You can also find us all over social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Search for Holy BatCast, you will find us. If you love the show, you want to help support the show, you can do that on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/holybatcast. A big thank you, as always, to our patrons. You guys are amazing. I cannot thank you enough, because you're getting the show regardless, but you guys care enough to support and make it that much easier on me. So big shout out to you all. You are awesome. I'm Andy DiGenova. As always, you can follow me on Twitter or on Instagram. It's just my name, Andy DiGenova. And again, we're part of the Real Fans Podcast Network. You can check out all those shows at rf4rm.com. I want to give a special shout out to our pal Michael Lyons, who just launched his own podcast. It's called From Pencils to Pixels, the Animation Celebration Podcast. It's also part of the Real Fans Network, but you can check that out. So if you love it when Michael comes on Real Fans or on Disorder, like every once in a while here on Holy BatCast, you'll want to hear him talk about animation with our other pal Scott Hopkins. Check that out, From Pencils to Pixels, the Animation Celebration Podcast. So this episode, we're going to celebrate an anniversary of a classic DC film. Shockingly, one of the first DC films. It's going to be interesting. And joining me is our own Swamp Thing. It's Jamie Drewley. Hey, Jamie, welcome to the Swamp, buddy.
Hey, it's good to be here. You know, mosquitoes, gators, gumbo, that whole thing.
I know. This is actually great because it takes place in Louisiana, and it's Mardi Gras time.
Oh, I didn't even consider that.
Yeah, we're getting into Mardi Gras.
I want a king cake. Thanks a lot.
Well, just the other day, I went to the park, Universal, just to get some steps in to enjoy an afternoon, and I brought home a king cake. I brought home a king cake, and it was delicious. They sold a pretty legit. What?
Did you get the baby?
No, the baby was stuck just in the middle, and then we didn't bother putting it back in the rest of the cake.
Oh, I see.
I've
never gotten the baby with any of them.
That's all right. I mean, never hurts. Can you get king cake in Indiana?
It's not easy to come by.
Yeah.
It really isn't. But it's possible. But then you have to wonder about whether or not it's going to be worth the price, because they're not cheap. When you come over here.
No, they're not.
They're
dirt cheap if you're in Louisiana.
Well, yeah. I mean, my wife's former partner brought her one back from the friggin' airport because his wife's family lives down in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And he bought a king cake at the airport and brought it back to her. That was the first one I ever had.
Yeah. It's like buying a Twinkie. It's cheap and plentiful. But yeah, I remember throwing Mardi Gras parties in California and I paid like $60 for a king cake because it was the only one I could get.
And that's about what they'll run you for, one that isn't going to be like, bite-sized, hostess cake style. But for me, I think it would actually be better off finding like a really good New Orleans bakery or Louisiana bakery and having it mail ordered and sent up.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be $20 difference to have that done, and then you're pretty comfortable that you're getting it right.
True. Yep. And you're supporting a local bakery, hopefully a Louisiana bakery.
I mean, because if we're talking about Louisiana cuisine, I'll tell you about the muffaladas when you're down there, right?
They have those at the park too, dude.
Okay, but they're not the same.
I know, but I still like that they got them.
That's what it comes down to. Yeah, I mean, I can make my own muffaladas. I've experimented around with it. I've tried to tweak and toy and everything else, but guess what? None of them come anywhere close to that one I had at Central Grocery.
I know.
Even bringing back the oh God, I'm going to butcher the name. Is it olive tamponade?
I think you got it. Olive tamponade.
Okay. You put that on the sandwich. Well, Central Grocery sells jars of that. And when we were down there, I brought a jar and brought it home, and I tried to make it. And even using their stuff, you can't get the bread quite right, or the meat isn't layered properly, or whatever. They have it down to a science.
Mm-hmm.
I do not.
Yeah.
And that's the way I feel about bakeries up here. Down there, they have king cake down to a science. Up here, they're just toying with novelties,
Yeah. Nope, you're right. But the point is, the one they sold at Universal, pretty solid. For being local and not that expensive, it was good.
Nothing wrong with that.
But we are celebrating the swamp. We're celebrating Louisiana and with Swamp Thing. But before we get to Swamp Thing, do you know what can often get swampy?
I would imagine it would be your balls.
Balls can get swampy, especially in the summer. Not right now. Now it's not so bad. I mean, it's probably pretty bad for Brendan down in Australia, but right now it's cool. Not as swampy, but you still want to take care of everything. So I got to give a shout out to our sponsor at Manscaped, manscaped.com. They got some great products to keep your junk from getting too swampy, to keep it trimmed up, to keep it smelling nice, to keep it looking good for your significant other or others, your wife, your husband, whoever. Manscaped's got great products, and you're going to want to take advantage of those. Go to manscaped.com, use the promo code BATSCAPED, 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 because not only will you get 20% off and free shipping, you also will support the show. So if you love this show, you haven't become a patron yet, and that's cool. Again, no harm, no foul. We still love you, but you're looking at buying something anyway, something for yourself, something as a gift for a significant other. If you go to Manscaped and you use BATSCAPED, you're helping us out. So please do that. Go check it out. We would certainly appreciate it. And we've talked about it before. I'll tell you again, though, the products are great. Use them all the time. Brendan has ordered and reordered. He didn't even wait for more free samples. He spent his money to get more of the stuff. That's how good it is. They got the regular trimmer. They got the nose and ear trimmer. Like I said, I don't like that I have to use the nose trimmer, but I do. And if I got to use one, this is a really nice one. Got the same battery as the other trimmer. Lasts a nice long time. Still haven't recharged it, just like the other trimmer. It's great.
I'm pretty sure these things last forever because I haven't had to recharge any of mine.
I know, it's good stuff. So, yeah. So, anyway, shout out to Manscaped. Thank them, as always, for their partnership, their sponsorship. We appreciate that. We appreciate them sending us products. But I also am telling you guys, if you want to check them out, I don't think you'll be disappointed. And it gives yourself a little something. And you get to 20% off, and you're supporting the show. So again, use that promo code BATSCAPED.
So I also want to throw in my 2 cents this week on it. I keep using these products for things that I have no idea if they're intended for this use or not, but I mean, it's not very far-fetched. I've been letting my hair grow out a little bit because it's cold, and I like having that, built-in hat on top sometimes because, I don't like my head being cold anymore and like the rest of me being cold. Well, I got sick of it yesterday morning, as a matter of fact, and I decided I was going to use those clippers to shave my head versus the industrial sized barbershop clippers that we have, because I didn't have that much of a layer going on. So I thought, that's excessive. Let's see how these do. Smoother than a baby's bottom, man. That you wouldn't believe how good those things work on my head.
All right.
So balls, head, doesn't matter. Do both at the same time. Even that thing worked amazing on my head.
Yep. I'll tell you, I use it on my armpits.
I've done that too.
They're sensitive, and it's nice on my little sensitive armpit. And sometimes that's the part I don't always think to trim up. And then every once in a while, when I do it, I was like, oh, that's nice without all that extra hair in there. So
listen, if you look like you have buckwheat in a headlock, it's time to invest in these clippers. That's all I'm saying.
That's exactly. So do something for yourselves, guys. BATSCAPED. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about Swamp Thing. It's time. This was an idea that you had, Jamie, and I appreciated the idea, putting it in the back pocket, waiting for the right time, because a few weeks ago, or actually I think it was around Christmas time, Swamp Thing, the 1982 film, directed and written by Wes Craven, it hit the iTunes, what we've been calling the digital bargain bin, right? The digital $5
digital
bin.
discount bin, but same thing.
Yeah. Which we check way too often. I buy way too many movies.
Twice a week.
But it's fun. Who cares? It's $5 and you get a little hit of that dopamine that makes you feel good. So you were like, "Hey man, Swamp Thing, it's $5 right now," and I'd already bought it actually when you said that. I was like, "Oh, I know, I bought it," and you're like, "So that's 40 years old. We should do it sometime this year on the show." So now's the time, and it's actually 40 years, like right around now, because it was released in February. When are you guys listening to this show? I don't know, but somewhere around February. Maybe.
Yeah, I think it said like February 22nd or 19th or something like that.
It was February 19th of 1982.
Okay. So we're, as recorded, this is just before that. But Oddly enough, when I made the post earlier today about watching the film, I always put up a movie poster for what I do with the posts, and it said coming this March.
Oh,
I found that
weird.
to be kind of weird.
Yeah, that is weird. So anyway, we bought it for $5. I'll tell you something. I already had the Blu-ray. Did I buy it again digitally just to have it? I did. I do that.
Well, yeah. So now later on this year, when they decide to release it in 4K, you'll automatically be upgraded. Allegedly.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully. But we thought it was a good thing to celebrate, and it's something that we haven't talked about much on this show. So yeah, we're going to celebrate 40 years of Swamp Thing. So let's turn the clock back. Let's go visit Louisiana and the swamps with Adrienne Barbeau, Ray Wise. What's the one guy's name? Louis Jordan.
Duroc, Louis Jordan.
Louis Jordan. Yes.
I have no idea how you actually pronounce it.
All of these nice folks. We're going to go back, spend some time with them in the swamp, and look back at 1982's Swamp Thing.
Now, see, you mentioned that we're going to be talking about Louisiana, but actually we're going to be talking about South Carolina.
I know it's fictional Louisiana, but actual South Carolina.
I mean, does Louisiana really have that much of an issue with getting people in there to film, or are the swamps that booked up with other people filming that they have to keep going to Georgia and South Carolina and all these other places?
It's a good question. I mean, they've certainly had their share of production in Louisiana, but who knows? 40 years ago, who knows what was going on? I wasn't paying attention to taxes and production in Louisiana in 1982. I was only 4. I had better things to worry about.
I hear you.
Yeah. Like getting my first Superpowers action figure. Shit like that.
Yes.
So anyway, as we said, Swamp Thing, this was released on February 19th of 1982. It was written and directed by Wes Craven. It was produced, this is a fun thing, by Benjamin Melniker and Michael E. Uslan.
I was today years old when I learned that.
Yeah. What's crazy is when they got the rights to Batman, they also got the rights to Swamp Thing. And who would have guessed that they would get Swamp Thing made first?
And I think there's even a quote in the IMDb trivia where Uslan said in an interview that they did this because everybody was telling them they were never going to make a Batman movie.
Yeah. So bizarre. But it is fun that there is that connection to Batman with Melniker and Uslan doing this. And so, yeah, it's like they produced a bunch of other random things while they were trying to get Batman made. Do you remember the cartoon Dinosaucers?
No.
It was a Saturday morning cartoon of like dinosaurs, but in robot bodies. And it was actually really cool. And they produced that.
I don't remember that at all.
Well, in your spare time, look it up. It's pretty fun. Anyway, as we said, this one stars Louis Jordan, Adrienne Barbeau, Ray Wise, and Dick Duroc as Swamp Thing, which he turned into a career.
Yes, he did. Something to be said for consistency, I guess.
Yep. And the music, this I didn't remember, was Harry Manfredini.
I was today years old when I learned that too.
Here's what's crazy. We'll just start with this. Worlds are colliding, Jerry. Because you got the producers of Batman. You've got it written and directed by Wes Craven. You've got the composer from Friday the 13th. And you've got Adrienne Barbeau, who at one time was married to John Carpenter.
It's a veritable cornucopia of horror and genre movie knowledge.
Like if you've got the big wall of conspiracy string, it all converges on Swamp Thing.
That's one magic loogie. Since you threw out a Seinfeld reference, I had to. Sorry.
Okay, great. So I will start spoiler free. And I want to hear, first of all, I just want to hear your memories of the film. Like, is this one that you watched a lot? Is it one that you always mean to? Did you love it as a kid? Have you never seen it? I want to know, what's your history on Swamp Thing?
This is one of those movies that I had not one but 2 family members say, turn that off. I'm not watching it again.
Oh, wow. That's fun. This was a mainstay for you?
Oh, it was. Absolutely. It was every time it was on, I was watching it.
Okay.
And my grandmother, who I told everybody I'd go to my grandparents' house every day. Well, my parents were at work in the summer, and it would be on, I assume it was HBO because that's what everybody seemed to have back in the day. I would watch it, and they'd play it every day or every other day at minimum, and I would watch it every time it was on. And my grandmother would be like, "Are you watching that dumb thing again? Ugh, this movie's awful." But my grandmother hated Batman Returns too. In fact, her words were, "That movie stunk."
Oh,
But
I remember you saying that.
yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
love
try
my
to not
grandmother.
hold it against her.
Well, I mean, we saw Gremlins in the theater with her. That's the last time my grandmother set foot in the theater because it scared the bejesus out of her, and she wouldn't go see another movie after that. So
Wow.
her taste in film, I mean, maybe that's why I married my wife. She reminds me of my grandma. She just hates every movie. uh, anyway, yeah, so I watched it all the time there. And then, when it wasn't summer, I'd be, at home or whatever. And my father got to the point where he's like, "Oh, I can't handle watching this again. Turn something else on." So yeah, I watched this all the damn. It was probably 83 or whatever when it came on, and maybe 84 on HBO. So I would have been 8 or 9, and I'm telling you, I had to have watched this thing 50 times. I had to have. But the weird thing about it is, it's one of those movies I never really watched beginning to end.
Yeah.
Like, my wife's brother had the DVD, and I hadn't seen it for years. And this was probably 10 or more years ago. And I saw it on his shelf. I'm like, "Oh my God, I haven't seen this forever." He's like, Wes Craven directed that. I'm like, "Oh, you're full of shit." And I flipped it over. I was like, "Oh my God, it was Wes Craven."
Yeah.
So I was like, "Let me borrow this." He's like, "Yeah, go ahead." So I took it home and watched it, and I was like, "Huh." And I didn't remember like the first 20 minutes of the movie. Like, the only memory I have of the film is like the laboratory stuff with Alec on. Like, I remembered none of the beginning of it.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's because my young brain just switched that part out because it wasn't particularly eventful, or if that's just like the only time I ever saw the movie was like from that moment on. But anyway, watched the movie all the time, revisited it 10 years or so ago and thought, "Huh, this has held up pretty well." And then I watched it, earlier today. I'm pretty impressed with this movie. I got to say, I know its reputation isn't the best, but I dig this film.
All right. So this is one that I've definitely seen it over the years, but it was not a mainstay like it was for you. It wasn't one that I watched countless times and I knew it by heart. But when I really fell in love with Batman in 1989, I fell in love with just superhero media in general. And so what I would do is I would just sort of go into the back catalog and find what else existed. And a lot of it came from on Fox right around 89, maybe 1990, on Saturday or Sunday afternoons, I can't remember because it was a long time ago, they would have superhero cinema and they would show something in the middle of the day as part of superhero cinema. And so that's
Probably
how
get some of that Red Brown Captain
exactly.
America action.
Yep. That's how I found out about the Red Brown Captain America movies. That's how I found out about the Doctor Strange pilot that never went to series.
I've still never seen that.
Oh, it's, I mean, I only saw it then, but it ain't great. But yeah, like that was how I discovered a lot of random other stuff that was out there. And I'm pretty sure that's how I found out about Swamp Thing, is it was part of that. But I was into it just because it was a comic book movie, and it was a comic book movie I had never seen. It was new to me, but I knew about it at the same time as the sequel. And so I feel like I saw them both very close to each other. But I remember watching it, I was a young kid. I watched it in the middle of the day on a Saturday. I probably caught it on cable too. And same thing, I would maybe come in half an hour late because that was when it was playing, and I'd watch it for a while and then I'd come out. So I was aware of it enough, but it wasn't one that I like. It never made its way into regular rotation. And then I didn't watch it for a long, long time. And then I think, like you, about 10 years ago, I bought the Blu-ray, or I think I got it as a Christmas gift, and I rewatched it then. So when we were going to do this, I was like, oh, I just revisited this. And I realized, no, it's actually been a lot longer than I realized. And so rewatching it last night, I was like, yeah, I don't remember a lot of this stuff. So I'm really glad I rewatched it because it has been a long time since I've seen this. So there were a lot of surprises. So it's one that I've watched a few times over the years, but never quite became a mainstay. But I always liked Swamp Thing. Right. So I would watch this when I could, but I would watch the sequel with Heather Locklear. I remember watching the cartoon. I remember the toys that were part of the cartoon. And then I remember there was the syndicated series as well that came right after, what was it? The Return of Swamp Thing? Was that the Was that the second one?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's always blown my mind that, like, especially at that time when all we had was, especially here, you know, we had Superman the movie and Superman 2. There was the Wonder Woman series, and then there was the Batman series from the 60s. That of all the DC characters to get a movie, it would be Swamp Thing. And then it wasn't just one movie, but it was two movies, an animated show, a live action show, a toy line. Like, it's just crazy to me that somehow Swamp Thing just got the attention that a lot of other really more well-renowned superheroes had to wait decades for. But I rewatched it last night, and what I remember about Swamp Thing, and I think it's true having watched it again, is it's a movie I want to like more than I do. I don't dislike it.
That's too bad.
Yeah, I don't dislike it. It has its charms, and it's fun for what it is. But I always, every time I watch it, I feel like, oh, it's Wes Craven. It's like going to be a hidden gem. And then I watch it, and I'm like, not quite. Wes was still figuring things out. Wes was still early in his career. He wasn't quite Wes Craven yet. And that's how I felt last night. Is I'm like, I do appreciate it for what it is. It is campy fun. I appreciate that it doesn't take itself too seriously, but I also feel like there's a lot of opportunity to do other things with it that they didn't quite take advantage of. So I like it. I don't love it. I don't think it's a great movie, but I think it's a movie that you can enjoy if you go in knowing what it is and just embracing it for what it is. I feel like this is the perfect movie to turn on at 1 a.m. on a Saturday night as you're like ramping down and you're half awake and you're watching on TV in the darkened living room. Everyone else has gone to bed. That's what the perfect time to watch Swamp Thing. It's not the thing that you're going to like everybody get around and you're going to be razor focused on it. It's just a fun, campy creature feature that would go great in the middle of the night.
You and I have kind of a different perspective about this film because I see the inherent camp that's just involved with being a superhero movie from this era, but I really thought the presentation was earnest. I mean, you get into most of the action sequences really feel like something out of the old Bill Bixby Hulk TV series, which I don't say with anything but reverence. I think they really tried to take this thing as seriously as you could possibly imagine them taking a B-list comic book movie 40 years ago. Like at this point, we only had, 2 Superman movies that we're talking about?
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else that predates this.
Yeah. Well, here's what's
without
crazy.
Getting into like super obscurity. You get into, the old, Nicholas, whatever his name was, Hammond.
Yes.
Did the Spider-Man stuff, the made-for-TV stuff. You can get into some of that kind of area, but like actual theatrical release superhero movies, you didn't have a lot to pick from at this point.
No, not at all. Well, and what's crazy is when I pulled it up on iTunes, because I did watch the digital version last night, in the description, it literally says a spoof of the old mad scientist films from the 1950s. That's the official description.
That seems strange. Are you sure that's not the iTunes writer's description?
I guarantee you. Well, that's the official description of purchasing the movie. I'm not saying Wes Craven wrote that description, but the studio did. Like, you have an official synopsis that a studio will distribute with a film, and that was this one.
Okay.
So that's how they present it. And what's crazy is somewhere in here, I think it was on the Wikipedia page, in the reviews, it feels like even they couldn't quite agree on whether it was a spoof or not, or whether it was earnest or not. And that's what I think is so interesting, because when I read that, I was like, I wouldn't call this a spoof. That doesn't feel like the right word for it.
No, because it doesn't feel satirical in any way at all.
But
like I say, in any of the campy kind of stuff that I feel like is just because of the action sequences. And, you kind of want to stay spoiler free with it, I guess, for a 40-year-old movie, which is cool. But, we'll get into more details of that. But like the way they actually present Swamp Thing, other than the fact that every time he bends a limb, you can see his suit wrinkle.
Yeah.
I think they really tried to keep him, he's got a zinger here and there, I guess, one or two, but I don't feel like they tried to do anything silly with him, if that makes any sense at all.
I've got to find this quote here where it was like 3 different critics and they all called it something different. Like one called it a spoof, one called it an homage, and one called it like a throwback or something. Where like they all were.
There's something in the IMDb trivia that kind of mentions that.
I think that's that's got to be what I was thinking of, but now I can't quite find it as we're talking. But
because if you read the Metacritic thing on it, the one quote that's on there is from Roger Ebert, and it says, "This has all the makings of a cult classic."
Well, right. And but even Roger Ebert's review calls it unabashedly campy.
I just don't see that. As far as like, the ultimate camp thing in superherodom to me is obviously Batman 66. And no disrespect to Batman 66, but they went out of their way to make that show like that. This movie to me doesn't feel like they did anything of the sort. Like, I don't even have the two on the same playing field, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I guess just the translation of it, or maybe it's my nostalgia for the film or whatever, but I really think this movie is far more serious than its reputation lends credit to.
Okay, so here it is. I found it. So Michael Betzold from All Movies said it's a spoof on the mad scientist movies of the 1950s, while Graham Clark from Spinning Image says that the film could pass as an update of those 1950s mad scientist movies. And then the Orem Film Encyclopedia states that it's an homage to 50s monster movies with comic book aesthetics. So like, but what I think we're honing in on is one of my issues with the movie. And one of the reasons I don't quite love it. It's too silly to be taken seriously, but it's not silly enough to be funny. And that's where I think it lands in a really weird spot. And that's, I think, what's missing is like, I do think Wes Craven knows what he was making. Do you know why I know that? Is because of the the text at the beginning of the film. It's so melodramatic and it's so silly that it's not on accident. Where it says, not long ago, in the unexplored reaches of an unmapped swamp, the creative genius of one man collided with another's evil dream, and a monster was born. Too powerful to be destroyed, too intelligent to be captured, this being still pursues its savage dream. That is written with tongue-in-cheek. That's too melodramatic to be serious.
I'm sorry, I don't see it the same way you do. I read that and I felt like I was reading that for the first time, because again, that first good 15-20 minutes of this film is absent from my memory of it. So like reading that today, I felt like I was reading it the first time and I was like, heck yeah, they're into this thing.
Okay.
So maybe not. Maybe it's just a difference of translation, I suppose.
Yeah, well, but again, I do think that's where I landed when it was over. Is I was like, I felt like it's not either. It couldn't decide. Is it taking it seriously or is it embracing the camp? And I think that certain parts of it do both, and it doesn't quite achieve either. Like I know, I mean, again, I feel like he is making a silly monster movie, and he knows he is, especially with the finale. And so at that point, I'm like, just embrace it and go bigger and go sillier. You know, really have fun with it, which is what the sequel does. Now, I have not seen the sequel in 30 years, so I have no idea if it holds up. But I remember liking it because it did know what it was. It was much more intentionally campy than this one was. But I just felt like...
Fun fact, I told you the other day about going on that trip to Hawaii when I was a kid.
Yes.
Do you know what I read on the plane on the way there?
What?
The novelization of Return of
Swamp Thing?
Yes. Because I had a real fixation on movie novelizations back at that age. So that just happened to be the one that was on the shelf before we took off. And I was like, yep, I'm going to read that.
All right.
And I read it and I was like, that doesn't feel like the first movie at all. And then I watched the movie and I was like, ooh. And that's the only time I've ever watched it.
Yeah, I think I only watched it once way back when. It is on iTunes, but it's $12.99, so I'm like, come on.
I'm not paying the $4.99. I'll take a swing. But
Yeah, put it in the $4.99 bin. So anyway, I want to be able to speak freely. Again, it's a 40-year-old movie, so I'm not too worried about spoilers. And honestly, there's not much to spoil, I don't think.
No, there's not. It's pretty straightforward.
It's pretty straightforward. But still, we'll speak freely. It's been 40 years. Jamie, you love it.
I love it might be just a hair strong, but I really, 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 really like it. Like, I did catch myself snickering at a couple things. Like, again, as I already mentioned, you can clearly see the guy's suit wrinkling every time Swamp Thing bends a limb.
Yeah, it's
and I let stuff like that go watching movies and TV from this era, because there's only so much you can do with the budget. What did this thing have, like a $3 million budget?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that wasn't like filthy dirt art house cheap in 1982, but it still wasn't, what it cost to make Star Wars, like 20 million ish.
I would have to look it up, but yeah.
You get the point. It wasn't a massive budget either, so you're not going to get like crazy good special effects or talent around what you're doing here. But the talent that was in this movie is still pretty solid overall.
Oh no, I definitely agree with that, and I do think that's what. One of the things that I liked about the sequel as a kid was I thought Swamp Thing looked so much better, because he doesn't look great in this movie, in my opinion. It's too rubber, not swamp enough. He looks too rubbery. And then, yeah, like you said, it doesn't quite fit right. So you always see the creases and everything, and it's just a guy in a rubber suit. And again, that's part of the charm of a low budget monster movie from 1982, and you just have to embrace it and go with it. But I just think that of all those different incarnations of Swamp Thing we talked about, and then of course the show that was on DC Universe 2 years ago, this is the worst Swampy has looked in live action.
Yeah, and I certainly would concede that, but still, for 1982 being one of the first out of the gate, especially for this level of this ain't Superman we're talking about. Not everybody and their mama knew who Superman was in 1978. To this day, half the people still don't know who Swamp Thing is. Probably less than half.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, like the one thing that stands out to me that made me laugh today was the scene where the SUV, he stops it in the road there, and he like pulls the door off and then rips the top off. Mm-hmm. If you watch the top, you can just see that, like, you don't see the cables or anything, but you can just see that it's a crane dragging it back toward the tree line. Mm-hmm. It's just hysterical.
Yeah.
But it's like watching the old Hulk TV show. If you've ever watched that scene from the old Hulk TV show, the Bill Bixby one from the late 70s, where he's fighting the bear, and then the next thing you know, he throws the bear into a pond, and you just see like this stuffed bear go flying over a tree line. That stuff makes me laugh, but I like it. Like, I'm not laughing to go, ha ha, that's terrible. I'm laughing because, oh my gosh, this is what we bought into back in that day.
Right. Well,
so like the wrinkles in the suit thing, watching it in anything but modern day high definition, would that have been the glaring thing that it is with what we see things with today? I don't think so.
I don't know about the wrinkles.
Definition on HBO in 1985.
Yeah, but I remember watching this on Fox in 1989 and going, he does not look very good.
Okay.
So
I think he looked good enough, but I definitely think he did look better later on.
Yeah. I mean, oh my God, the 2019 show, I think he looked perfect. But
there's a lot more technology involved. You know, 37 years later.
I love Adrienne Barbeau. I think she is awesome. I mean, because she's horror royalty, of course, right? So we just love her because she's so cool. This is the same year as Creepshow, which is so fun.
Another DC comic, no less.
Yeah. And yeah, Louis Jourdan, like I bless that guy. Like he's completely owning it and playing it as straight and as serious as he can, well, like
he's a Bond villain guy, so
yeah so he
actually I don't think he was a Bond villain until the year after this came out, come to think about it. I think Octopussy was 83.
Oh really?
I think so. Don't quote me on that. Brendan would be the guy to ask for that, but
okay.
He ain't here, so
So anyway, I like the cast overall. I do think it's a good time. Like you said, I think that the action, it is very akin to those, I don't even want to say 80s, those 70s action TV shows. And I do think, and I think that's part of what I think disappointed me a little bit, is it was stuff like that where like he would grab a bad guy and then it would just cut to the bad guy like being thrown across the swamp. Stuff like that, where I was just like, and again, like I know that there was only so much they could do. It was low budget, but that was the stuff where I was like, oh, I wish there was something a little more imaginative, a little more over the top than him just throwing the bad guys, because that was really all he does, is he just throws them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were on budget restrictions. I mean, there was a snippet that kind of, I went, oh, and my heart dropped into my ankles when I read on the IMDb thing, and that in the original script, the scene where they're escaping from Arcane's place and he's in pursuit of them, they were going to have like this big underwater chase in these tunnels underneath.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, because they basically go under the water and then resurface in the swamp. There was supposed to be a whole piece in there of Arcane chasing after him when they were doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But they couldn't do it because of budget.
Yeah.
And I imagine technology limitations and what have you. But.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we both read the IMDb trivia, and it sounds like there was a commentary track of Wes Craven that he did for Swamp Thing. And I love that he did that, but even in what his comments, when you read it, you could tell he wasn't particularly proud of the movie either. And I think at a certain point he said, yeah, I thought I had blown it, and so I was surprised to ever get a job again. I thought my career was over at that point. And then 2 years later, he did A Nightmare on Elm Street, and everything changed. But
that's when he became Wes Craven.
Yeah. So I just thought that was interesting too. But I mean, he's still Wes Craven, so there's some nice things in here. But I think even last night when I was watching it with Catherine, she's like, "So, did you like that?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's fun. You just got to know what it is." Anyway, Ray Wise does play Alec Holland. I forgot he was in this. It's crazy to see him so young. And
he was one of the bad guys in RoboCop. Like
yes.
Obviously, I knew him from this first, but since he's in that part of the movie that I don't remember, and then it's like Dick Durock in the suit for most of the rest of the time. Like I don't recognize the face. Like I recognize him from RoboCop first and foremost.
Well, he's a character actor, and he's just been working for 40 years now.
Yeah, and he's done a ton of things, including a lot of DC voice work, apparently. So
yeah, I want to say there was even something really recent that he popped up and I was like, oh, Ray Wise, all right. Like he's one of those people that whenever he pops up, you're like, oh yeah, that guy. But he's so young.
Sadly, I think he and Adrienne Barbeau might be like the only two people left of the cast and crew that are even still alive.
Yeah, no, that's true.
That's a sad state of affairs when you start clicking on them and they're like dead at 67, dead at 59.
Yeah.
Of course, one of the guys made it to like 103, so I mean, good on him.
That's good. Oh, yeah. That's what I was going to say. So we were talking about Dick Durock, who plays Swamp Thing. Now, first of all, I did not realize, and this was kind of interesting, is that apparently they did have Ray Wise in the Swamp Thing suit, and they shot like half the movie with him and Dick Durock. And then they realized that like they just can't pass for one another. And so that's why they were like, well, Ray Wise is Alec Holland and Dick Durock is Swamp Thing. And so that was interesting. I didn't even realize they had tried to make him Swamp Thing too. But
that would have been fun if they would have left it as is, and then you could have just spotted the differences in size as you went along.
They did it in Batman 66, where Robin became a 45-year-old man in every fight scene with like blonde hair. It's crazy. But anyway, do you remember the Incredible Hulk episodes? It was a 2-parter where there was an evil Hulk.
Yes. Oh God, I love those so much.
That was Dick Durock.
You're kidding me. Amazing.
That is what the internet tells me.
He had like oh God, I haven't seen it since I was a tiny kid, but the evil Hulk had like a beard or something, didn't he?
He didn't have a beard, but he had crazy hair.
Okay, maybe that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Of. So this is 2-parter of the Incredible Hulk. Yep.
I remember sitting in my grandparents' living room watching a commercial for that, and they showed like the 2 Hulks, and I lost my shit right then and there. I'm like, I have to see this.
Yep. I know. As a little kid, that might as well have been Batman and the Joker. It was just,
I'm saying.
there's another Hulk and they're going to fight? Oh my God.
It was always the evil twin fighting. Like, if you remember watching Knight Rider, there was an evil version of Kit.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what it was called right now, but anytime
Car.
an evil version of Kit would show
it
up,
was
I'd lose
Car.
my shit too.
Literally.
Yeah.
Karr or something. Yeah, Car.
Oh, that's what it was called.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
It was literally called Car.
Yeah, because I haven't seen that in like 40 years either.
And the evil Michael Knight.
That's right.
With the goatee.
Yes. See? All you had to do was throw evil twins involved, and I was in.
I mean, hey.
No wonder that the trope has survived so long.
Exactly, it worked. So yeah.
Like Flexo and Bender.
Exactly. Except Bender is the evil Bender.
Well, yeah. Bart and Bort, that whole thing too.
So anyway, getting into Swamp Thing, we are going to speak freely, guys. We already kind of have been. It's fine. I don't think we've spoiled anything for you. But I do remember, and it's funny because it tricks me every time where they go, oh, the Hollands, and they introduce themselves. And you just assume that they're married. And there's even a part where Adrienne Barbeau as Alice goes, yeah, save it for your wife, Holland. And then you find out they're brother and sister. Every time I watch it, because I don't watch, I watch it every decade or so, I'm like, wait, what? Wait, are they married? Why is he hitting on her? And I'm like, oh, that's right. They're brother and sister. That's a fun little misdirect. It gets me every time.
Yeah. And you can kind of see the wry smile on his face when she says that to him too. But you can also translate that as I'll get you anyway. But still, that was fun play on the audience there.
I do love the swamp, even if it was in South Carolina. I think it's great.
Yes.
I think they do such a good job of like making it a character, and they really take advantage of it. And again, because of the budget, there's not a lot of locations in this movie. There's the lab, the swamp, and Arcane's house. That's about it.
Well, if you even count the airboat scene as a swamp, because it's really not a swamp at that point. But
right. That's the one part they did not shoot in the swamp.
That was shot in like a lake by LA, I think it said.
Yeah.
Which is so odd, but I don't even think of lakes being out there. But
see, so like that part, like I like Swamp Thing pops up, he throws a couple of the bad guys. You're like, okay, fine. But then you get a moment where Swamp Thing is driving a speedboat towards a fan boat. And then he jumps out and they collide and they explode like they're made of nitroglycerin. And I'm like, more of this. This is what I came for. More of this silliness, please. When they exploded, I was like, what the hell? What was in those?
That was another one of those moments that made me laugh. But like with the top flying off of the Chevy Blazer, I was laughing because I was having a good time. It wasn't because I was like, oh my God, that's so stupid.
It's like a fun. No, it's fun.
Yeah. That'd be one of those things. If you and I were sitting there watching it together, we would have clanked beer bottles at that
Exactly. Like, again, that's what I'm there for. Like, let's have a little fun with it. I'm down. There is the scene where Adrienne Barbeau takes a bath. We'll just jump to that.
You want to jump to the international version or the U.S. version?
So this is where I'm going, right? So she's taking the bath in the swamp. You kind of get a glimpse of her goodies, but not quite. But yeah, the international version is like you get more Adrienne Barbeau boobs, and it's funny because like Wes Craven of all people was like, he's like, that was so gratuitous. And he was the one who didn't want it in there. He's like, there's just no reason for that. So I appreciate that he was respectful of Adrienne Barbeau. However, I will say, so when I was a kid, I remember I think I was watching this movie. There was this friend of the family. His name was John. He was sort of like our uncle, even though he wasn't related to us. He called her Adrienne Big Bust Barbeau. And I remember watching this with us, and watching the movie, even though Wes is like, we didn't really need that, but for the international version, why not? But they take full advantage of Adrienne Barbeau's bounce and boobies through the entire movie, because she spends half the movie running, and she's bouncing all the way.
like 2/3 running and 1/4 or 1/3 falling.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, she's really the stereotypical trope of the female running from the bad guy and tripping and falling.
This is true.
She does it at least 3 times, at least.
But she's pretty awesome. Like, I mean, yeah, she does end up getting captured at a certain point, but like for the most part, like she's the one who escapes, and you know, like she calls for help. She steals the notebook. There's the moment where she gets captured and escapes again. That one guy like grabs her and kisses her, and he goes, "What do you say to that?" And she's like, "Not much." And she knees him and swims off.
Oh, that bastard in the red headband, boy.
Yeah.
He couldn't get the hell out of my sight fast enough.
Yeah. Well, don't worry. That he got it good.
Fun fact. His death scene when I was a kid for like years up until I watched it 10 years ago, I thought he died because Swamp Thing was pulling his hair so hard.
No.
It shows you what the hell I know, right?
Yeah. What do you think of Jude? The young man with the big glasses.
I understand that we're not talking about Shakespearean caliber acting here, but for what that kid was hired to do in this film, I think he served the purpose and served it pretty well. Is he amazing? No. Did he even do anything else? I think he did like his own short film about his time spent on this movie. Checking on his IMDb page, that's the only 2 things I saw. But I thought he was fine. I mean, he provides a little bit of comic relief. He also provides a little bit of heart to the film. I liked him as a character. Could the acting have been better? Sure. But I can probably make that gripe about a lot of movies, this one included, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, I loved him. I thought he was so funny. But yeah, like as I'm sure you saw on the trivia, you know, there was some disagreement with some people like, oh, he's so bad. And Wes Craven's like, no, I thought he was pretty good. They apparently did find him and hire him locally. But I think he's so funny because he's so deadpan. And whether or not that was intentional, it's really entertaining. So like when he's sitting there just drinking the Coke and she runs up and he's like, oh shit, here comes trouble. Like it's funnier with no inflection. And again, maybe that was an accident, but he made me laugh so much more because of how nonchalant he was about everything.
He had the 2 lines in the film that made me laugh the hardest.
Okay.
The first one being do you have a gun? What kind of place do you think this is? Of course I do.
Yeah.
And then the part that literally made me just laugh and laugh and laugh watching it today, even though as he was saying it, I remembered it from when I was a kid laughing all the time. Oh shit. There goes the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Dude, I laughed so hard at that. It was great.
He's funny, and I forgot that he's in as much of the movie as he is. Like,
there's a piece where it feels like he disappears for a good chunk, but then he shows back up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's involved.
Yeah, like he stays throughout, which I was a little surprised by. But the moment you mentioned when they're in the gas station and he goes, yeah, what kind of place do you think this is? Of course I have a gun. It's very similar to the line from the new Scream when Sidney goes, I'm Sidney Prescott. Of course I have a gun. And so it makes me wonder, was that a nod to Wes Craven? Like, was that a little nod to Wes Craven's lesser known movies like Swamp Thing? Or just a coincidence?
I think it could go either way, and I'd believe you.
Yeah, maybe I'll tweet the directors and ask them. And go, hey, I just randomly watched Swamp Thing. Was this intentional?
You never know when somebody will respond.
I know. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't.
They'll be like, hey, this is the first person to catch that. I mean, that happened to me with Batman White Knight. Because I gave a shout out to, oh God, what's his name now that wrote that? Murphy? Sean Michael Murphy, something like that. I'm ashamed of myself. I can't remember his name now. Okay. I tweeted him and I was like, it was really cool that you did that nod to Over the Edge in this. He's like, you're the first person to catch that. And I'm like, really?
Hey.
I walked around patting myself on the back for like 2 days for that one.
All right.
So, yeah, you'll never know when somebody might respond just out of that principle alone.
I know. I like when they do, but like I tweeted Joe Quinones about Batman 89 asking like why he gave a mustache to Alfred, but he never responded, so I still don't have an answer.
Well, shit.
Because I asked, I'm like, oh, was this a likeness thing, or did you just want to make it closer to the comic? And he never responded. So, oh well. Anyway, back to the movie. Yeah, I forgot that Jude was there along for the ride for most of the movie, and there's a moment where I thought he gets killed, and I was like, again, like I'm like, I don't remember any of this. I swore I watched this recently, but I don't remember any of this. Apparently, last time I watched it, I either wasn't paying as close attention or it's just faded in my memory. And I forgot that here Swamp Thing has the healing powers, the healing of the swamp.
Well, he says he has healing powers. But then later on, when he applies it to Adrienne Barbeau, he gives her some of that titty moss. He's just copping a feel there. That ain't healing.
They should sell that as merch.
Titty moss?
Swamp Thing titty moss.
I'd buy that for $1.
Yeah. Manscaped, new idea, guys. Let's bring in some more of the female clientele. Sell some titty moss. It moisturizes and cures.
Oh, we're on one tonight, boy.
Yeah. But anyway, so sorry.
Healing powers, yes.
Healing powers.
Yeah.
Start talking about Adrienne Barbeau's boobs, I get real distracted.
There's a reason they're so prominent in the film.
What were we talking about? And in the poster. You mentioned the poster. I really like the poster. I think that's such a cool piece of art, and it's very reminiscent of old monster movies, right? You've got the big hulking Swamp Thing carrying the beautiful girl. And that was something that crossed my mind as I was rewatching this, is I'm like, you know what this feels like? It does feel like a spin on the Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah, definitely.
Where you've got the scientists out there in a watery locale. The monster falls in love with the girl. But here, the monster can speak, and the monster's a little more heroic. But it almost feels like a spin on that, which I thought was really fun. I don't know if that was intentional. I don't know if that was what Wes was going for. But I could totally see it as a spin on that.
I would say I'd be more apt to say yes than no on that. Because the whole time I'm watching it, I was thinking very much the same thing. But I read the IMDb trivia before I watched it, because I was like, okay, if there's things they want to point out, I want to be able to spot them instead of having to rewind. Mm-hmm. And I kept seeing all the stuff about them saying things about the classic mad scientist movies or monster movies or what have you. So maybe that was just implanted in my head before turning it on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know, and they keep saying mad scientist movies, but again, my brain immediately went to rubber suit monster movies, Creature from the Black Lagoon, which I guess is siblings with mad scientist movies, but it just felt more.
They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, but again, that's part of the fun of it, and I do think that a lot of that was intentional. Again, especially as you get to the finale, when the Arcane gets the secret formula, and I do like the scene when he's at dinner and they're all celebrating Bruno, which we don't talk about him. No, I don't talk about Bruno these days.
I'm just ignoring that you even said that.
That's fine.
I caught it. I'm just that's a joke that would have delivered better if Roman was on here with you.
Okay, well, that's fine. But anyway, I like, they're like, hey, he did such a great job. He's our guest of honor. Drink. And he's like, oh, and I also gave him, he gets the privilege of being the first one to try this out. I thought that was
evil as hell is what it was.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome and evil. And
that transformation scene and the way that the actor sold that transformation scene scared the living bejesus out of me when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That messed me up, dude.
Nice.
And then, of course, the Arcane transformation a little while later got me just as bad, too.
Oh, all right.
I had a real weak constitution when I was a kid. I told you the first time I watched Nightmare on Elm Street, I had to sleep. I didn't sleep right for days. But anyway, those moments, could you call them campy? Maybe, because the special effects are of their time and whatnot, and not high budget even for their time. But I really think they did a nice job in both of those cases selling that. Credit to the actor, the special effects department, and Craven, all three in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that part's fun. And again, these is as it gets towards the end where it really becomes, and I do think it's campy, and I think intentionally so. And maybe that was Wes's thought process: is I don't have a lot of money, so I'd better embrace it, or it's really not going to work. But yeah, that transformation, and then what he transforms into, that little tiny creature, is so weird.
That it was, but I mean, when Alec explains how the formula works, it makes sense.
Sure. But then of course when Arcane does it and he becomes this, I guess it's kind of like a wolf with a bat face almost.
See, I thought he was like a werepig.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I guess that works too.
Or actually, the first thing that popped in my mind watching it today, for anybody who's seen the Private Eyes with Don Knotts and Tim Conway from back in the early 80s, was a Wookalore.
Oh, I don't understand that reference, but
You've never seen that movie?
No.
Oh my God, dude. It's harder than hell to find. Like, I have a DVD copy of it. I don't even want to know how much that thing's worth because it went out of print like 30 days after the company bought the rights and started selling it.
Oh.
And that was the last official release. You can't find it digitally or anything else. Somebody's probably got it on YouTube somewhere.
Okay.
Because I think this is one of those movies that's tied up in licensing rights and what have you. But
weird.
It's a good time. It's very Halloween-y kind of theme. You know, it's like a murder mystery at this big scary mansion kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, how do you go wrong with Don Knotts and Tim Conway? But anyway, there's a thing Tim Conway keeps talking about in the movie called a Wookalore, and it has like a pig nose and sucks your brain right out and all this other shit.
Oh.
Anyway.
Well, I'm sorry. What's a Tim Conway?
About 125 pounds.
Hey, there you go.
Took me a second there. Sorry. Slowing me up, too.
Well, anyway, the point is it's Man Bear Pig.
Man Bear Pig. Yes.
And again, when you see that design, you don't think they're intentionally cheesy. Come on.
Maybe, I guess. I don't know. That's not how I took it, but I guess I can see it.
Well, so I will say this. I loved, and this was something I always loved, and it was one of the few things I did remember about the movie from when I was a kid, is I loved that, like, yeah, you've got your hero, you got Swamp Thing, he's a monster, he's a swamp monster, right? That's fun. His nemesis in this movie, and then again in the sequel, is, yeah, this old aristocratic European gentleman. So that's not super exciting. So I always loved that they found a way to transform him into a monster so we could have a monster versus monster finale. Because that's what I want from a Swamp Thing movie. So I dig that. I like that he grabs a sword. He ain't playing fair.
No, he was out to shank somebody's ass. And then he gets up in that swamp and Alec ducks underneath the water and he starts smacking the water with the sword. I'm like, this dude just wants to hurt somebody.
That sword is very similar to the one I have on my wall. I have a sword that's a replica of the one from the movie Dragonheart. And it kind of looks like that.
Interesting.
One of the random pieces of memorabilia in my home.
I own that movie. I bought it in the digital discount bin like a year and a half ago. I still haven't watched it since the theater.
I love that movie. It's one of my.
I wouldn't even call liking it, but for some reason, it's one of those that just kind of got lost.
Oh, totally. I wouldn't even call it a guilty pleasure, though. I just think it's underrated. I really like it. But anyways, I like that it's
it had like 4 or 5 sequels, didn't it?
Yeah, they did a bunch of straight to video
stuff. They were all direct to video.
Yeah, I think I watched the first one and I was like, maybe not. Anyway, I like that it's monster versus monster, and I like that for their big finale, like they're in the swamp and they got the fog machines going, so it's nice and misty in the swamp. But this is one of those things where I'm like, you couldn't have choreographed a fight. Like, it just felt like they went, okay, guys, fight, go for it, action, just fight, because it's really clunky. And this is what I was like, oh, I want to like this finale. I want it to pay off of monster versus monster. And it's literally like during rehearsals of like, figure it out, just fight.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's hard to fight when you're waist deep in water.
I guess so. In the swamp.
I don't think the climax was the strongest part of the film. I guess I'll certainly concede that.
And I think that's what I like the mood of the film. I like the cast. I can look past the some of, like the campy design, because again, I think that a lot of it is intentional. They're embracing it. I think for me it is the action beats where I get disappointed. I just wish there was a little more to them. They were a little cleaner, they were a little more worked out, but it just felt like they kind of like had to do what they had to do and keep shooting, and so like those are the parts that let me down.
That's fair. I would say you're pretty much on par with what I think, in that honestly I think the action bits, particularly the airboat thing and that final showdown between Arcane and Alec, are probably the weakest parts of the film for me. Mm-hmm. But I still don't think they're bad. I just don't think they're as good as they could have been, or maybe even should have been.
Yeah. Well, and
so we're pretty much on the same.
Yeah, and I hear you. And again, it's one of those, you just kind of go with it. You're like, it is what it is, right? You embrace the B movie of it, and that's how you have fun with it. I remember that. I always remember that scene too. Again, it's to me one of the most memorable scenes. Is I remember he gets his arm chopped off, and he's in the dungeon, and there's the light coming through, and he reaches up to it, and when he reaches up to it, he like grows another arm. I love that part. Yes. The little tiny
that was pretty creative,
little leaf arm. It's so funny. But like, yeah, and it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, like, okay, you're making it work with what you got. I like it. I appreciate that. But yeah, I always thought that was fun.
I mean, if you want to get nitpicky, the part where he's sitting with her in the swamp after the arm is cut off, and she asks him if it hurts, and he says, only when I laugh.
Yeah.
He's sitting in a point where the sunlight is hitting his shoulder in that moment. So, I mean, if you want to get nitpicky, we can call out stuff like that, of course. But I don't want to be nitpicky because it's other things to talk about.
He was still learning what he could and couldn't do. So, he's only been Swamp Thing a day or two. I'll also say I appreciate that he was Swamp Thing 30 minutes in, man. For a 90-minute movie,
they didn't waste any time.
Yeah,
it's only
efficient.
a 91-minute movie. So if you wait an hour for the hero to show up in a 91-minute movie, you're on the fast track to getting screwed up. Is what's going to happen.
I know, but I mean, it's not like we haven't seen that.
Fair point.
That's what I remember about the old TV pilot of Doctor Strange. Is it takes the whole time for at the very, very, very end for him to become Doctor Strange. But again, it was meant to be a pilot, so they're like, oh yeah, because then we're gonna have the show. But then they never made the show.
Well, I mean, it's not like they would have waited, until the end of the 13th episode of a 13-episode season to put on a costume, right?
Who would do that? That would be silly.
I still like that show, but I'm still not happy about that.
Yeah. But yeah, I appreciate it. It doesn't waste a lot of time. They're like, no, you're here for Swamp Thing. You're here for the creature. We're going to give you the creature 30 minutes in. And when he popped in and he first saves Cable, is her name, Alice Cable, which is again, having most recently watched the DC Universe show, which I love and I still miss, by the way. In my memory, I was like, oh, it was Abby Arcane. I was like, oh, well, that's right. Adrienne Barbeau was not Abby Arcane. I think Heather Locklear was Abby Arcane in the sequel.
I don't remember enough about the sequel to say either way. I remember Heather Locklear being in it and not liking it.
Yeah, I remember nothing other than I liked the suit better. She was in it, and I think she was Abby.
And I definitely remember it being a lot purposefully sillier.
Yes. I think there were more creatures too. I think.
Maybe.
But
if it
hits $4.99, we'll do this again.
Right.
iTunes, if you're listening, I'd happily give you $4.99 for the Return of Swamp Thing, but $12.99, get over yourself. Not going to happen.
Well, since there's no other DC movie that's significant to talk about that would be having a 35th anniversary in 2 years, we'll just go ahead and do Return of Swamp Thing.
Oh, okay, great. I mean, the fact that the Return of Swamp Thing came out in 1989 with Batman, it was a
banner year.
It was a great year. It was a good year to be a comic book fan.
I remember Swamp Thing mania gripping everywhere you went.
Oh God, I think you shaved it into the back of your head, right?
They had titty moss all over Spencer Gifts. You don't remember this?
Yes, absolutely. Everybody was walking around with T-shirts with Heather Locklear on it. So, yeah, Swamp Thing. It's good, clean fun in the swamps.
It probably could have benefited maybe from getting a little bit more time out of it to maybe squeeze some story or anything else. But I appreciate being able to watch a movie at a brisk pace that's not like overly hurried, still tells the story effectively enough, gives some entertainment value. I mean, there's something to be said for just the way this movie's done, whether you think it's campy or earnest or what have you. Everything now has to be like on the low end 2.5 hours. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but sometimes I don't feel like watching an epic like that, you know?
Yeah, no,
I feel like watching this to me feels more along the lines with like some of the movies like Guy and Jeremy are talking about over on Get to the Podcast. They're talking about these 80s action films. Hell, hardly any of these things crack the 95-minute mark.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're just get in, do their thing, and get out. They don't overstay their welcome. And I really feel that way about this film. I don't feel like it overstays its welcome. If anything, I would have liked a few more minutes, but it did its job. I think it did its job well enough and effectively enough that I really appreciate this film. And I wish more people had an appreciation for it other than just either writing it off as being some cheesy ass thing from the early 80s that isn't worth the moniker of a DC character, or they just maybe have it from the perspective that you have it, but not on the appreciative side of it like you seem to have. I think I'd like people to give this more of a chance. I guess is what I'm getting at.
No, I definitely agree with that. And that's what I was going to say is for a movie like this, you know, that knows what it is, you know, and it's a low budget B movie, monster movie. This is not the type of movie you want to be 2.5 hours. You don't want it to overstay its welcome. And I don't feel it does. I feel like a nice, brisk 90 minutes is the perfect length for a movie like this. I have no problem with long movies. We talked about it recently in regards to The Batman. Give me a long movie. I don't mind it. But for a movie like this is the right length. And that's what, you know, especially in the 80s, that was what B movies were. Is, oh man, 90 minutes in and out. Something that people can rent at the video store on a Friday night with the kids. Like that was the whole target for things like this. And I think that that's appropriate. But what I was going to say is where I do see Wes's talent really come through. I feel like Wes's direction in this is fine. I would even say it's pretty good. But again, he was still pretty early in his career, so you don't see the style that then he brings even 2 years later in Nightmare. But in the writing of it, I think the writing of it is really smart in crafting a movie that delivers on Swamp Thing, that's a good story that keeps moving while still keeping in mind the budgetary restrictions. So not having a lot of locations, not having a huge cast, spending most of it in the swamp, but never being boring, never feel like you're wasting our time, so it doesn't feel padded in any way. And I thought the story was just a very logical progression, you know, of she's coming in to support this scientific research that's happening, and things go bad and a lot of people are wanting in on it, and when it goes bad it creates Swamp Thing, and then you've got the MacGuffin of the Notebook and the chases with some nice action beats throughout where Swamp Thing reveals himself as we go, like leading up to a finale where the bad guy gets the serum and transforms into a monster himself. It is the right story to tell for this movie, for this character, within the budget and restrictions they were given.
Certainly. And I do want to bring this up because I briefly mentioned it earlier, but it's always stood out to me. It's something I remember about it from even when watching it as a kid. The conversation that he has in that dungeon, or whatever you want to call it, between Arcane and Alec, where he's trying to get he's like, you know, tell me where we went wrong with this formula so that I can do it. And he's trying to tell him there's nothing wrong with the formula. That whole exchange and conversation that he basically caps off by saying the formula simply makes you more of what you already are. Mm-hmm. I just love that exchange between those two. Mm-hmm. I think that's so good. I actually would say that that's my favorite part of the film.
Oh, okay. Well, and when they have that conversation and he says that of like, oh, the formula just makes you more of what you already are. Did that remind you a little bit of Captain America?
Yes, I suppose that's
when he says, you know, it makes a bad man worse and a good man better. So it just reminded me of that, and I'm like, I wonder if that's another coincidence, or if there was a little bit of inspiration there. Because that was not what the super soldier serum did in the comics. That was something that was added later.
Well, I mean, they've retconned so many things.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and I'm not even saying in the cinematic stuff. Even in the comic books, they've retconned so many things over the years. Who knows when that actually came to be? But
my understanding, and I'm sure there's someone out there who will correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that concept was actually made up for the 1990 Captain America movie.
Oh, the Italian Red Skull version.
Yeah.
That's a piece of work, let me tell you.
Oh, I love that one too. But again, it was the time in my life when I would eat up anything that was based on a comic book. Did not care.
Oh, old boy spiked that camera like he just scored a touchdown at the end of that movie, man.
So, anyway, Swamp Thing. What do you have a least favorite part? I think you kind of said it, but least favorite part of the movie. We're doing a little disorder here.
I wish the action sequences would have been a little bit better. Like I do like the one where I keep laughing about the ripping off the top of the SUV, but like you can just see the thing being dragged back toward the trees. I mean, that I know it's supposed to give the impression that he's throwing it, but you know, if you watch it and pay any attention to it, it's clear that that's not what's happening. But that was more of a funny thing for me. I like that sequence, but the airboat thing and the final showdown with Arcane, I think I give a little bit more credit to the Arcane thing than the airboat thing. The airboat sequence felt to me almost like there was a lot of rehash footage in it, which I can't eat a movie's lunch for rehashing, especially when you're dealing with budget restrictions. But like, how many grenades did Homeboy do the skyhook shot with? You know, it's just I think there was a better scene to be had there, which I don't know if that was first unit stuff that they were doing out there or what, but I know that was the one thing that was done at a different location. So who knows what caused it to be weak for me, but and still I don't think it's bad. I just think that's the one thing that, like, if George Lucas was going to come in and redo a special edition, that's the part I want him to fool with the most. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, and I agree. That's what I said. Is I feel like the action beats, they just could have been better. They just could have been a little more well thought out. And I understand that it was 1982, so you're not going to get The Matrix, and that's not what I'm asking for. But just something that was a step up from the Incredible Hulk TV show that they had to make weekly. Your favorite part, I think you said, was Swamp Thing and Arcane.
The conversation about the formula, because you know it starts off where. I don't even remember the exact wording, but Arcane accuses him of saying riddles. He's like, you know, don't give this to me as a puzzle or something like that. He says to him, and the conversation goes on for probably 2 minutes, and he brings Cable into the room, and you know says, you know, you either give up the proper thing of the formula or you give her up, and they go back and forth, and he says the formula simply makes you more of what you already are. And he's like. And, you know, you see the light bulb go on in his head, and he's like, you know, Bruno's thing was stupidity and timidity. So, you know, he shrank and became like this mousy kind of a creature.
Yeah.
I think that whole thing, if there's any part of the film that I'm going to call brilliant, it's that.
Okay, cool. No, it's a good choice. I think I liked, as far as Swamp Thing goes, his debut, like when he first shows up in the movie and he saves Cable, and you're like, oh, awesome, he's already here. I thought I thought we were gonna have to wait longer. So I think I really like that. And then I think the scene in the gas station between Cable and Jude really made me laugh too. I really like both of those.
That was a good one.
All right, so why don't we give some closing thoughts for 1982's Swamp Thing, 40 years later.
Well, I mean, there's so many pieces of music in this, since we didn't dive deep into that, I'll just mention it as we're going out here, that are so reminiscent of the Friday the 13th films.
Yeah.
Like you'd almost swear some of it was lifted straight out of one, but I'm okay with that because I like that music. So it's a good time. I have a really good time watching this. I don't have a good time at the expense of the film. I just simply have a good time with the film. So maybe I'm just the perfect target audience demographic for this film, more so than other people seem to be. I I do think there's inherent camp involved with it. There's limitations to the movie technologically and financially speaking, but overall, to deliver the film that they did under the conditions that they did, and apparently the shoot was miserable, in the middle of the summer in a swamp in South Carolina. Boy, don't even get me started with that humidity and shit. What that must have been like.
Oh, I just can feel the mosquitoes hearing that,
Oh God, I'm like slapping myself on the back of the neck thinking about it. But no, I think it's a good time, and I truly believe this film is underappreciated. Am I going to label it as a misunderstood classic or anything along those lines? No, I don't think I am, but I will say that I do think that the film deserves more appreciation than what I think it gets.
All right. I do like it. Again, I think that, I always just want to like it more. And I think just because it's fun and it's silly and it is what it is. And I think that you have to know that going in to enjoy it. So yeah, I also would not say, oh, it's an underrated classic. You've got to watch it, because I don't think it's going to be for everyone. And I think that's okay. But if you like a good campy monster movie circa 1982 and you like DC Comics and you want to see what comic book movies looked like way back when, in another era when we didn't get a new one every week, Swamp Thing is a good time. Like I said, to me, it's the perfect movie for a late weekend night, eating pizza, lights dimmed, and just hanging out. Like, it doesn't demand a lot, and you can just have a good time with it. So as long as you go in knowing what you're going to see, you can have fun with it. And that's how I enjoy it. I don't regret the purchase. I think it's fun. And yeah, so I do enjoy it. I wish I liked it as much as Jamie does, but I still like it well enough. It comes with a caveat and a recommendation.
There you go. For anybody out there that did not catch it in the discount bin, because I don't know if it's still sitting there or not, I do believe I saw earlier today that it is currently on Tubi TV. So if you guys want to check it out at no cost to you, you can check it out over on Tubi.
Oh, all right. Cool. Well, there you have it. Swamp Thing, 40 years. The late, great Wes Craven. I still miss him.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that, but...
One more thing I want to tack on. I've seen movies that came out 10 or 15 years after this that didn't look as good as this in the comic book genre. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
All right. That's fair. Anyway,
yeah, I do miss Wes. Several of the movies toward the end of his career I wasn't the biggest fan of, or even earlier in his career. Like I'm not a big fan of like Last House on the Left or any of those, but Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street. He's got People Under the Stairs. I love that movie. I don't know why people don't like that movie either, but I love
People
that
Under
movie.
the Stairs is awesome. Are you kidding me?
I love that thing.
Oh, come on. It's great.
Serpent and the Rainbow. I mean, he's got so many classics out there. So yeah, rip to Wes Craven, man. That cat is missed in the cinema genre.
Well, that was the other thing I was going to say is no matter how you see this movie, whether you think it was an intentional spoof, which I think spoof is too harsh a word, but I do think it was an homage to monster movies. And you think about that, and Wes Craven was doing like an intentional homage to classic movies. And then you think about New Nightmare and you think about Scream. You think about how many movies he made that intentionally tweaked the conventions of the genre they're in. That just must have been part of his sensibilities. Like, he was a movie director who also loved movies, and so he used his movies to celebrate other movies that he loved.
Yeah, I think that's very apt.
So, and how fun is it that a legend like Wes Craven directed a DC film? Not the most widely discussed one, not the most beloved one, but it's still really cool that he made one.
So many people either don't know that this movie exists or don't realize that it's a DC film, or just write it off because of its reputation. I mean, it just doesn't get discussed. And the other thing that the IMDb page pointed out to me that I thought was fascinating, this is like one of apparently very few, I can't even think of what the other ones would be, that Warner Brothers did not produce.
Yeah, because it's MGM.
Which means it's not a Movies Anywhere purchase, sons of bitches. But anyway.
That's all right. Like I said, I already had the physical copy. I didn't even need to buy it digitally, but I did anyway.
I don't know. I don't think I have a copy of it other than this digital copy that I just bought a few weeks ago.
I think they released like a cool Blu-ray 10 years ago, which is why I I wanted to get it again. So I'll have to pull it out and see what other kind of special features on there. I should have done that before we recorded, but I didn't. So, oh well. What are you gonna do?
Well, there's always the 50th anniversary.
That's true. We'll see you in 10 years. Same swamp time, same swamp channel. All right, but it was fun looking back. It was fun to have one of those $4.99 purchases actually a reason to watch it, because many times I will buy them and then they'll just keep getting knocked down the list and then I may never watch them. It's okay.
Dude, I can't even tell you how many movies I have in that library that I forget own or have not watched yet.
Yeah. So I appreciate the idea, Jamie, and I appreciate you giving me an excuse to watch this, and I don't regret it. Not at all.
Right on.
So everybody out there, watch Swamp Thing for its 40th anniversary. Celebrate Mardi Gras with a little Louisiana, little mad scientists, a little DC monsters, and the lovely Adrienne Barbeau, the legend.
Get you some titty moss, a king cake, and some Dixie beer, and it's a hell of a night.
All of those things. Get you some Popeye's chicken.
Oh, yeah.
All right, some sweet tea. It's good stuff. But yep, happy 40 years to Swamp Thing. Super fun. One of the first DC films, which again, it's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah. I wonder why I have all this gray hair. That's the answer, because I'm freaking old.
Here's something is I could not find, you mentioned that it cost about $3 million, but I could not find anywhere how much it made.
No, I looked for that too, and I didn't look real hard for it, but I didn't see it anywhere.
Yeah, I checked multiple places. I could not find it anywhere. All that I could find was that it said it did very well on home video and on cable, which is why they eventually made the sequel. So my guess is it didn't do much in theaters, but it was the perfect VHS rental, again, on a weekend with your pals in the 80s. And then it was on HBO a lot. So I guess that was how it found its audience and eventually led to the return of Swamp Thing.
I mean, if HBO paid by the number of viewings that it had every time it aired, I probably gave them their budget back on the thing, okay?
Nice. So anyway, we're going to wrap up this look back at Swamp Thing with some, it was a good chance for Michael Uslan to get his feet wet, if you will, before he eventually went on and did Batman in 1989. But Jamie, it was always a good time. Thanks for taking a trip to the swamp with me.
Yeah, it was a good time. We'll have to go take a shower and get this humid swamp ass off of us now, but it was worth it.
That's right. Use that Manscaped deodorant when you're done.
Yes, sir.
Your wife will thank you.
Indeed.
Anyway, as always, they can't find you on social media. You're out there hiding in the swamp, just like Swamp Thing. But keep tuning into Holy BatCast. You'll hear Jamie. He's never too far. He's just lurking. So keep an eye out for him. He'll be back before you know it. I already told you where to follow me. But thank you guys, as always, for joining us. Thank you for downloading the show. Please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Visit holybatcast.com. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. Holy BatCast. We're not doing the Wayne Manor mailbox on this episode, but stay tuned to the next episode or a recent episode, and we will do it then. Don't take it personally, but if you've got something for the Wayne Manor mailbox, as always, that email address is holybatcast@rf4rm.com. If you're going there, you can also go to manscaped.com. And again, use the promo code BATSCAPED for 20% off and free shipping. A big thank you, as always, to our good friend Gaurav Venkateswar. He made our theme music. His work can be found at gvtunes.com. So that'll do it. On behalf of Jamie and Swampy and Adrienne Barbeau and her boobs and the titties and the titty moss. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Same swamp time, same swamp channel. Holy BatCast is not affiliated with Warner Brothers or DC Entertainment. The views and opinions shared by the participants are theirs and theirs alone and do not represent the companies or organizations they happen to work for.
Oh shit. There goes the neighborhood.
Are you going to copyright Titty Moss as soon as we finish? Are you doing it
I I might restart my Twitter account just to go out there and hashtag Teddy Moss.
Okay, good. Or you buy the domain name right now. Hurry before it's too late.
TeddyMoss.com, org, COCURU.
Reach out to Adrienne Barbeau, see if she'll be your official spokeswoman.
Speaking of reaching out to Adrienne Barbeau, were you as convinced that I am that Swampy was standing there watching her bathe and he was
in his bunk?
He was rubbing the rhubarb with you?
It wasn't his arm that was growing.
Oh, we're 14-year-olds.